What are the three most important strategic investments that help a community grow? Ron Turpin offers his insights on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Ron Turpin, who is the chairman of the Northeast Indiana Strategic Development Commission, and he also serves as an Allen County Commissioner. Welcome, Ron.
Welcome. Thank you.
You've been involved in so many things that I could probably have made a much longer list of all the things you're involved in. I recall when you and I first crossed paths, it was, I actually, when I thought about this, it sounded kind of strange. About 20 years ago, we're that old.
Yeah.
20 years ago, we were both affiliated with United Way, and I think that was the first time that we encountered each other. To set the stage for the discussion today, let's talk about the genesis of the Strategic Development Commission, what its goals are, what it's achieved thus far, and generally who the partners are. I'm not expecting you to list, everybody, but just generally the kinds of partners that you've had working with the commission.
Sure. So one of the things back in 2012, 2013, there was a conversation. I was an executive at Lincoln, and there was a conversation about the Fort Wayne Chamber of Commerce. And it's just not as vibrant as it used to be, And so how do we kind of kickstart economic development in Allen County? Because at the time you had the Chamber, you had the Economic Alliance, and then you had a couple of other organizations. So in that discovery process, we ended up creating Greater Fort Wayne, Inc., to be the Lido for Allen County. So you merge the Chamber, you merge the Alliance, Leadership Fort Wayne to do that. And so I was the first chair for the first 5 years of the board. And so you fast forward to 2021, and a number of legislators were asking the question about when it comes to economic development in Northeast Indiana, who's the right person to go to? Because they were confused. We have Lidos out there. We have, chambers out there. You've got the regional partnership, the regional chamber. Who is the right person? And is there a strategic plan for the region? We've talked about wage growth, population growth, degree credential attainment, but who is the keeper of that plan and what that looks like? So the legislature put together the Strategic Development Commission in 2021. I was asked by the governor to go on that, became chair of it. And really, the goal is pretty simple. We are to be the designers and the keeper of the strategic plan for the region when it comes to wage growth, population growth, degree credential attainment, and to give annual updates to the legislature on efforts to achieve that. So when they're looking at that, they come to us to say, what are you doing in Northeast Indiana for those three things? And so the commission is made up of 11 people, and it's geographically diverse. So you have several that are appointed by the governor. You have one each from each caucus in the legislature, so 4 that are there. And then the mayors and commissioners caucus have 1 mayor, 1 commissioner, and then 2 Lidos, one from a county over 50,000 and one from a county under 50,000. So that comprises the commission. And so the goal was to build this strategic plan. So 2021, 2022, we do that. We go throughout all of the region, talk to the Lidos, have them put groups together to really say, what are efforts that we can do to address population growth, wage growth, degree credential attainment? If we had money, how could we do that? And so we brought that report back to the legislature towards the end of 2022. In the 2023 session, we were granted $30 million from the legislature to put the plan into action. And so we're in that process right now of doing that. And right now we give quarterly updates to the legislature because we have the money. And as we're spending it, we tell them what we spend it on, what the goals are, And the whole premise of this is, if you invest in us, Indiana, we think we can double the attainment efforts that we would do normally without those. So if we thought population would grow 0.5%, it'll be 1% now. If we thought wages would grow 2%, it's 4%. So that's roughly that. And then the language of the bill says that we have to update the plan every 5 years. So we're 3 years into this plan. So we know that we've got to, update that in the future. So those are the things that we're looking at, not just the granting right now and the metrics that are being achieved, but also looking eventually at how do we revise the plan for the future.
So you're good for 5 years, but at the end of 5 years, in theory, you could have some people in the legislature say, well, we think that this effort is not going very well, and that could be the end of it. Is that correct?
Well, when the language was created, it wasn't created with funding. It was, as the legislature normally does, they'll create something and say, you figure out how to
Sure,
make
it's
it
an
work.
unfunded mandate.
Right.
Yeah.
So we raised the money, to do the initial plan. We hired TIP Strategies, the same one that did Allen County's plan, to help us do this. And we raised money from the private sector and the public sector to get that done. And then once we had our plan together, we gave that to the legislature. We're the only region in the state that has a strategic plan. No one else does. And so we said, here's the plan. Let us achieve this. Now, the good news is with all of the economic turmoil that you have in the legislature right now, our funding's set. And so
For how long?
well, so it is the life of the plan right now. So the grant was done in the 23 session. We got the money in 24. And so at this point, our plan is to have all the money spoken for probably by the end of next year. And then that way we give reports to the legislature. And at some point in the new plan, we would say, either reinvest in us or, we can look to other avenues too. Do we have more, regional funding? There's all kinds of options that could be there that we've not explored yet.
So talk very briefly about because I'm sure that if you have that much money, you've given out a lot of money to a lot of places. But generally speaking, what are the buckets where you've been putting this money?
So if you look at it, when you look at Ready money, for example, Ready's bricks and mortar, right, for the most part. This money is different because it's really designed to focus on collaborations, partnerships, co-ventures, new things that we have not done in addressing population growth, wage growth, degree credential attainment. So there's 3 overall teams that we kind of break the money up into, a third, a third, a third. The first is housing. How do we create more affordable housing throughout the region? Second one is, I'd call it quality of place, for lack of a better term. How do we focus on infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, and having that infrastructure necessary for growth?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to quality of place.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And third is really education. How do we focus on education to get those degree credential rates higher? And so that's roughly kind of how it's broken out.
Where does childcare fit into that? Because I know that
that would fill out in the education.
That's in the education part.
That's right.
And we're going to be dealing with that in a future podcast, so we don't have to go too far deep into it. Okay. So you recently announced that you're going to do a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, for those who don't know it. I find that there are a lot of people who don't know what a SWOT is. And I guess I'd like to know what you hope to accomplish with the analysis, and then we're going to get into some follow-up questions about that. But what do you hope to accomplish with that analysis?
So really there's 2 goals here. The first is we have a new gubernatorial administration. So when Governor Braun came in, as probably many of your listeners know, he completely replaced the IEDC board of directors. You've got new staff there, and they're having a little bit different vision, for economic development in the state. Under Governor Holcomb, it was very much, we're going to do attraction of businesses, coming into Indiana. Governor Braun is much more about how do we grow businesses here, and that's the focus. So part of that is we're doing the SWOT analysis so that we can be proactive in going to the state saying, here is who we are as Northeast Indiana, not as how someone in Marion County, may think we are. So it's really walking through, this is who we are. And the second piece of this is we have to revise this plan in 2 years anyway. So this is kind of the starting point that we can start building the revised strategic plan with what we get from the SWOT analysis.
Hey, Ron, don't we already know who we are? Because there have been a lot of initiatives, a lot of studies, a lot of data-based research. You know this over the years because you've been around, right? lots of organizations, entities, and whatever have taken a look at this. Don't we already know who we are? I mean, I think there was, what was it, a number of years ago, it didn't, what was called the Northeast Indiana Partnership, which is now NEI. You remember that big thing that they did, and lots of people were involved in it and figuring out, like, how are we going to identify the region and what, I think in some cases it wasn't a formal SWOT, but there was parts of SWOT in there. So, like, really, we don't know who we are?
Well, what I'd say is, yes, we know who we are. However, are we all rowing in the same direction? Are the boats going in the same place? And I don't know that they always are, because we all like silos. And, when these plans, no plan is static. And so, the thing you learn in a business career is, you either plan or you fail, And so to me, this is us planning for success. And, the business world is constantly changing. I know I was CFO of companies in my career, and you had to constantly be prepared for the unexpected. And a lot of times the world looks very different today from an economic development perspective than it looked 10 years ago when NEI first did that analysis. And so the other thing is, Rick, we need to be very honest too, which we not always are. And a lot of times when we do this work, we don't really focus on the weaknesses. We talk about the strengths, we as a region probably are much more co-aligned than any other region in Indiana. We have a lot of dialogue and discussion. However, we can do better. And so we need to focus on those weaknesses. How do we fix those? And how do we make sure we're investing in the right things? I think critical analysis is always important. And so that's why it's important to go through this process. And we've encouraged people in this SWOT analysis, be honest. Say the thing that's uncomfortable. Say what you really are thinking, not what you want people to hear.
One of the things I've experienced in this region, I don't know if it's just particular to this region, but other regions, is that, yes, we have a lot of well-meaning, intelligent, bright people who are trying to find the silver bullet for various challenges. One of, I think, the impediments that we have in this region is we have a lot of intelligent, bright people who are looking for the silver bullet. You mentioned silos. Sometimes I guess we could categorize it as silos, but sometimes it's simply just a lot of eager beavers out there just rushing to try and solve a problem. Do you envision that through the SWOT analysis or anything else that the commission does, that maybe it will make that happen less? Because I feel like sometimes we stumble over each other, right? And sometimes we have duplication.
Yeah, I think one of the critical things is there is no silver bullet. Let's just say there is no one thing that we'll do that magically everything happens. What I look at is why I think it's important to look at population growth, wage growth, and degree credential attainment. Looking at those three things really help drive the region. To me, the aha, as we did the strategic plan, was really the degree credential attainment. That's something we don't talk about very much. It's not necessarily sexy. Let the school people take care of that.
Well, we did talk about, we did set a goal that was, I guess the goalpost kind of moved on it, but like we are going to have, what was it, 60% of people who would have credential attainment by 2025, and then it became 2030.
And we're failing miserably.
Well, yes, we are.
Because the reason is we did not involve the schools. That can't just be on high, a board of directors of an organization that aren't tied to schools that decide, okay, we're going to have, this level of degree credential attainment. In Northeast Indiana today, only 43% of adults have a marketable credential or a 2 4-year degree. If we do not address that number, that affects directly wage growth because we don't have the population who are trained for the jobs of the future, and it affects, wage growth and population. So they all tie together. So part of this investment and the strategic analysis is, how are we making sure the right people are at the table that can help address the issues? How do we get more of our adults to have credentials? What are the right credentials to get? How do we invest in those? And bringing other parties to the table, the unions, our K through 12 schools, our universities. Part of this strategic analysis, we involved all the universities in Northeast Indiana. They had not been at the table before. We had conversations with public school corporations. They hadn't been at the table before. So that's part of this deeper dive that you need to bring more people to the party to say, okay, what are you going to do to help?
Is that so that would be your answer to the question, why has it been so difficult to achieve that, that benchmark of credential attainment?
I think it is one answer. I think there are no silver bullets, right? This, I believe we will move further faster because we're doing this than if we didn't. Because what happens is we get okay with okay. If my business is running okay and I'm making money and profits are coming in, that's okay. But let's look at the rest of the region and say, we still today, we're 85% of the wages nationally. Now, we tell ourselves that's okay because the cost of living is cheaper here. Is it? I mean, is housing any cheaper here than it is in Des Moines, Iowa, or Nashville, Tennessee, or, it certainly is in California.
Or New Jersey?
Right. However, but we're competing on a global basis. And so for us to say, well, it's just cheaper to live here, well, that's not an excuse. We need to do what we can to get wages higher. We are growing population wise. We are one of the few counties, regions that are growing in the Midwest.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to the population. I really want to focus on that. Um, I'm trying to be somewhat linear here. There's been a shift at the state, right? I mean, I kind of understand it, sort of, right? Quality of place used to be sort of the flavor of the day. It seems like now it's workforce development, it's talent development, as well as wage growth. I think that's something that the new governor has been emphasizing. Um, and I'm guessing you may have to adjust some of your goals based on, I mean, do you adjust your goals based on who the governor is or who's in the administration?
I don't think so.
You don't think
I
so?
mean, look at it this way. The IEDC, the state, is one bucket in economic development. To me, when it comes to quality of place, local government has much more to do with that than anything the state or the federal government are going to do. Think about the things that go into quality of place.
Right. And I always thought they went hand in hand. I always thought that, like, yes, it's important for us to develop talent. It's also important for us to encourage that talent to stay once we've educated or trained them. And similarly, quality of place becomes important if you want to attract, workers from outside of the area. So I hope in a way that's not getting thrown out, the quality of place.
No, I don't think so. And I mean, it still is. Again, I would go to if the state, every resource is finite, right? The state has, they don't have infinite dollars. We, local government, don't have infinite dollars. Businesses don't have infinite dollars, but it's us working together to put a plan of how we drive things. So the state will have their piece. Okay, so how do we work with them to make what we need to have happen? And then local government, what are the things that we need to do? Roads, safe streets. I can go through a number of things investments that we can make, locally. We have a capital improvement board for part of that, for quality of place. So there are tools that we have to be a part of that as well. Then the business community as well. What do they do to help, in that quality of place? And so it's really the three working together. So if the state changes some of their goalpost, that's fine. I mean, we can work with that and, figure out, okay, how do we keep moving forward? Even again, that's the whole point of being nimble, is that we're not stuck in our rigidity of this is the way it has to be. If IEDC changes some of their things, and the truth is, we're probably in a better position, Rick, because we've spent a decade plus doing regionalization. We have a plan. No one else does. And the SWOT analysis, we will help work with the state saying, here's what we think, you should be focusing on when it comes to Northeast Indiana.
Comes to Northeast Indiana, and I am going to come back to that because I have a couple of questions about it. Let's talk about population growth. You say that we're doing pretty well with population growth, but that's not so much the case in the rural areas. So I don't know if you're just talking about Allen County or just the metro area. I mean, you either have declining populations or you have static population in the rural areas. And we have an aging population. Right now, 1 in 4 workers in almost every industry, sometimes it's more, is at or near retirement age. So this is not an issue that's going to go away anytime soon. I'm kind of equating retirement with age, where some of them are going to be dying too. And I guess I can say that at my age, at 72, yeah, it's the reality of it. What can we do about population growth that we're not doing now?
So I think as you look at, there are a number of rural areas in Northeast Indiana that are growing. There are people who want to work in Fort Wayne or Allen County that want to live in DeKalb County or Whitley County, and there's that cross section there. So when you look at the 11 county region, there are some that are declining, no doubt about that. But there are some that are bucking the trend in the rural areas and growing. So I've always felt that having a strong, vibrant core, Fort Wayne, Allen County, is essential to overall regional growth because the stronger we are here, that will have positive impacts to the surrounding counties around us where people may want to live in a smaller community, more land, whatever. And, here it's not a big commute to go from Markle to Fort Wayne or to go from Columbia City to Fort Wayne. It's pretty easy. And so I think the things that we can do are continue to focus on quality of place, that this is a good place to live for these reasons. And then, really continue to work together that if Whitley County gets a new manufacturer, that's great. That's good for all of us. That's one of the things I think the region does pretty well is working together that if a community gets, a new employer, we celebrate that. For us, I think what we can do is let's be more proactive on the jobs of the future. And how do we focus on making sure that we are attractive to those jobs? Because what those site selectors are looking at are not just, do you have a good site to build on? More importantly, they're asking, do you have the employees I need?
That's absolutely right.
And we can't be stealing from one company to fill another. So I think we need to be focusing on what are we doing to grow, those future employees. Now, one of the things that's going well, when you really drill into the population growth numbers, a lot of it's immigration, that we're attracting a number of people from all over the world who want to live in Northeast Indiana. And so that's a good thing. Legal immigration has been a success, in this region. It's allowed us to grow and get a new set of workers, many who are highly trained. How do we help encouraging that too?
Let's talk about wages, because wages have for a long, long time have lagged. And part of it, I think you alluded to the idea that we think, well, it's okay, it's a cheap place to live, so therefore we don't have to pay people a lot of money. That's been a real bugaboo, Ron, because those wages just don't seem to move much. From your position, not so much as an Allen County Commissioner, but in relationship to the Strategic Development Commission, what are the answers? Because that seems to be a real sticking point. It just doesn't move much.
Well, to me, it goes back to how all three of these things are all very symbiotic. And so what we can do is if we focus heavier on degree credential attainment, training the future workforce, I believe that eventually drives population growth and wage growth. Because as you have workers who increase their skill set, then you see employers that are like, okay, I'm willing to pay for that. Low-level jobs don't take a lot of training. The higher level the job is, the more that we train mechanics and engineers, those are the jobs that, pay the kind of wages that we need to move the needle. So what the Development Commission can do is helping make sure that we are investing in our schools, doing much more vocational ed than they ever did before, where you see, currently Fort Wayne Community and East Allen both have career centers. Northwest and Southwest are getting ready to have them as well. And they're all working together to say, okay, how can we focus on that? The young person who's interested in engineering, but may never thought they want to do that. How do we steer them to that? How do we steer the young person that never thought that they would go into the medical field to consider that? So that's a key piece.
Yeah, there's kind of a cultural shift that has to happen here too, and I don't know whether you consider that to be the responsibility of the commission or whether that's a collective responsibility. And the cultural shift is we still have a lot of people out there, living the old way, which is I'll go get a job, in some manufacturing plant. My job won't change. I'll have job security for 30 years and everything will be hunky-dory. That's not the case anymore. And that message, which we've all tried to drive home, really has been out there for some time, and yet it feels like the progress on that is very slow.
It is. I mean, one of the things, really, when you focus on young people, we have 70,000 children that are currently in schools today in Allen County between the public schools and private schools. And so you look at that saying you have a talent pipeline every year that's coming out. We know that the majority of them have no idea what they want to do for careers. And so one of the things, this is kind of separate from the Development Commission, but a few years ago, a group of us formed a new organization called Grow Allen, which was focused really on one premise. How do we ensure that every child who graduates in Allen County knows what they want to do, they know how to achieve it, and they have the tools to successful adult? If we can achieve that, that's a game changer
So
for all of us.
Grow Allen is still a thing. It's still happening.
It is. It is.
Because I feel like I think we're down to like about 5 minutes. So if I appear rushed, but I feel as though the Strategic Commission and Grow Allen really haven't gotten a lot of attention for what they're doing. You're smiling. I think you kind of agree with that. And I'm wondering very quickly, is that intentional, or or is there something else going on there that it kind of feels, sort of under the table?
No, I don't. It's not intentional. There's a couple, it is and it isn't. You don't have to measure success by how many press conferences you have or how much, advertising you do. So when I look at Grow Allen, a lot of that is building the relationships, the trust. We have all 4 public school superintendents working together. All 4 are on the board. We have the chancellor of Ivy Tech. We have a number of other people that are involved, and it's making these incremental changes. The first place they're focusing on is early learning. Everything from prenatal. We have one of the highest, maternal and prenatal death rates in the country in Southeast Fort Wayne. We need to address that because if a child is born, premature, they're going to be behind forever. And so it is making those incremental steps and bringing partners together to have that discussion. The Development Commission's helped fund that, but really these are things that take years to do. But the first piece of this is building trust among partners so they can work together. And that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, I've kind of skipped a few things. We could do another couple half hours. Maybe we ought to. So you mentioned the people who are involved, and a lot of the people who are involved, and I don't in any way, I'm not denigrating anyone, but they're generally well-connected people like yourself, influential people, at least the people who are driving initiatives like this. And of course, they can't do all the work, right? I have often wondered, how does one, or how does an organization like the ones you're involved with, how do you go about galvanizing the community at large? I have a feeling that number one, there are a lot of people out there that have no idea who you are. I'm not saying you, Ron Turpin. I am saying the Strategic Development Commission. They have no idea what it does. They have no idea what the offshoots of the commission or the partners of the commission do. And I just feel like there's a separation here. And yet, I think the community at large's involvement is vitally important because I think they can help share the message. And I'll let you answer in a second. I have a story that I love to tell very quickly. Many, many years ago, I had a job interview in Cleveland. I was in the hotel restaurant in the morning having breakfast, and it was a really rainy day out in Cleveland. And I asked the waitress, I said, "What does one do on a rainy day in Cleveland?" And she looked at me straight-faced and said, "Go back to bed." And I felt, okay, Cleveland might not be a place I want to go. So how do you galvanize the rest of the community?
So on the Development Commission, remember, they have one goal is to put together a strategic plan. And so part of the SWOT analysis we talked about earlier, that is one where we're challenging every LEDO in every county to bring a variety of partners together to be part of that SWOT analysis. And so some of that may not be the normal people that you would think. Who are those wide section of leaders in Wells County or in, Adams County or any of the other 11 that we have? And so that's the first piece. But on Grow Allen, a lot of what their work is when they look at early learning and workforce development, they're bringing together people who aren't the people you normally think of. The person running the career tech program at East Allen, or It is the person highly involved in this initiative or that. They're the ones that have the knowledge that, frankly, I don't have. What I can do is I can raise money, and I can help raise profile by bringing the right partners to the table. But it does, to your point, it takes that wider cross section in order to make progress happen. It's small incremental steps. There is no, again, silver bullet. It's not going to happen tomorrow. I do feel that over the course of time, we'll keep moving forward in what we're doing. But a lot of it is we have 4,000 nonprofits in Allen County. And the only way that we're going to be successful is to take them out of the silos and start working together to achieve a common goal. And it is these collaborative efforts that help drive that.
Well, I wish you much luck with that. Thanks, Ron, for spending some time with us. Hopefully you'll come back and we can explore some of the other topics that we didn't get to today.
So anytime. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Thanks, Ron.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish Podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.